You see, god-tier artists across different eras and styles tend to have relatively similar psychologies. And the kinds of art problems that artists like you or I would face today are the exact same ones that they go through, only except they'd figure the game out and then become some of the best artists ever. And so that difference that contrast is what we're going to examine today, so that we can understand the psychology of some of these behemoths and apply that to our own art. Now, one of the most glazed artists today is John Singer Sargent, and for good reason. He was really good at capturing reality in just a handful of masterfully placed brushstrokes, and that ease and simplicity is what everyone talks about, with no one ever mentioning the sheer hell this guy went through just to get one of these paintings right. Which sucks, because understanding his process reveals the psychology that makes him so good. And so let's have a look at this painting. On the surface, it's just quintessential Sargent, perfectly rendered skin contrasted by brushwork that looks like scribbles up close but reads perfectly when you take a step back. But that's just a surface, because this painting gave this guy an absolute nightmare. See, when the model initially sat down for the portrait, Sargent liked the natural positions that her hands fell into, and so he begged her to hold that pose so he could paint it, and so she did, and the painting was going great, but he just didn't like how those hands were turning out, so he scraped the paint off and redid it. But he didn't like the redo either, so he had to scrape that off and redo it, and again and again and again and again, and for a whole 2 hours, one of the most acclaimed painters in all of history is struggling his hardest to get those damned hands right, but he just simply could not. Now, this wasn't really uncommon for him, because making a bunch of these errors and mistakes and failing and like trashing and discarding all this art, this was something that was a thing for him. But the difference, the separator, so to speak, is in how he responds to these kinds of situations, because he's trying to get this lady's hands right, but he's erratic. He's like walking, he's pacing up and down, he's telling himself, Gainsborough would have done it, Gainsborough would have done it, he would have gotten it right. Gainsborough was an artist from an earlier time that Sargent really looked up to. Now, unfortunately, they ended up running out of time for the day for the portrait, so Leslie, the lady, had to come back a few days later to finish it up. And so when she comes in for the next session, not only does Sargent get the hands right, he gets them right with ease. For the countless amount of times that he messed them up, in the actual attempt where he got it right, he accomplished it like in a snap, like it was nothing, like it was child's play. And that finishes off the painting that art nerds are going to glaze a bunch today, for good reason, but just no one ever talks about the hell this guy went through just to get a minor aspect of it right. Sargent's situation here isn't unique to him among like the greats. If we x-ray scan a lot of Da Vinci's works, we can see how dissatisfied he'd be with like hand positions, with figure positions. Now he'd be constantly changing things around until he actually liked it. Hayao Miyazaki, we're going to talk more about Miyazaki in a bit, but when he sketches something out that doesn't exactly fit what he wants, he just trashes it, discards it, and it just keeps going until he actually comes up with something that he thinks is kind of decent. And so whether or not you make tons of errors and mistakes in your drawing isn't the thing that matters, but it's in how you respond to them. Because cliche as it might sound, if Sargent got into his own head because he couldn't get those hands right, he would have either just given up or try to stay within his comfort zone and do something that was do a hand position that was a little bit easier for him. And if that's the mindset he was coming in with his art, he never would have gone that good in the first place, that here we are like 100 years later still talking about him. So yes, bro, if your sketchbook has made you want to like tear your eyes out, just know you're in good company. Literally every artist in all of art history ever has gone through that. Hayao Miyazaki. Miyazaki's been really influential over the past couple of decades. I mean, what's to be said about Ghibli's art that hasn't been said already, right? It's just fantastic. Yet, while he was making one of these films, he went through, I think, a problem that 99% of all artists ever can relate to. In 2006, while working on the film, Miyazaki visits a museum in London, and he's absolutely taken aback by the art that he saw there, particularly by this painting, Ophelia. He was blown away by how meticulously the details were rendered and how perfectly the values were handled. And so this visit kind of made him feel like his own work was just kind of shoddy in comparison, which, I mean, maybe an artist who's never been there, right? Now this kind of shows two things. He comes away from this museum trip with that universal artist feeling where he felt like he'd seen art that was just way better than his. But against that response to that, because upon seeing all this better art, he doesn't wallow in a perceived sense of inferiority, as a lot of artists seem to instinctively do, but rather, the effect this experience has on him. That kind of made him realize that he had to raise his own standards and to go harder in trying to make something genuinely remarkable. And this sort of experience isn't necessarily uncommon among a lot of elite artists.
저도 어릴 때부터 지금도 그렇지만 저 사람 그림처럼 그렇진 않아요. 정말 지금도 인스타를 보면은 이거 왜 이렇게 그리지, 왜 이렇게 잘 그리지, 이런 사람들이 너무 많아가지고 이걸 계속 방문하고 다시 또 마음속으로 난 잘하고 있어라고 다시 또 다독이고 이런 과정이 계속 반복이에요.
And you can span this a bunch across the different grades. Like Van Gogh, when Van Gogh was getting into art and he knew that his figure drawings wasn't at the level of other artists, he acknowledged the gap and just doubled down on his study. If you take it from a slightly different angle, take someone like Togashi, the author of Peak Fiction. Early on in his mangaka journey, he was shown some manga art that he just felt he would never ever live up to. And that dissatisfaction was literally just fuel for him to double down and just want to draw even more so. Which to me answers a question of comparison. I see a lot of artists complain about comparison, and understandably so, but by looking at a bunch of these like situations we've been talking about, the answer doesn't seem to be to find some sort of way to stop comparing your work to other people's, but rather to reframe your reaction to seeing really good art. And there's clearly multiple ways to do this. For example, you could do a Miyazaki, because upon feeling there was a sort of gap between him and the artist that he saw at that museum, he was driven ever more to use all the creative power he could muster to create something incredible. Or you could look at, Togashi or Van Gogh, who used this gap that they felt between them and the artist around them as even just more justification to double down even more so. So there's all those kinds of ways. Or you could low-key just admire it. That's what I like to do. When I see like really insane art, like some Wallop or something, I look at that and I think, how the hell does a human being have the capacity to make this? And I'm like, oh, good art is kind of like really exciting. I don't know. It just makes me happy. I don't know. But essentially just reframing that reaction, especially in a sort of way where you can kind of make it work for you instead of the other way around, seems to be the way. So the basic central theme should be kind of clear by now. These artists encounter obstacles that should be demotivating, like all these like mistakes and errors and failures, or seeing better art. But not only do these not demoralize them, they flip the script and use them as just stepping stones to getting better. Which is cool and all, but what's even cooler is the frame of mind they have to be in to allow them to do this in the first place, to allow them to act like this in the first place. Because from my POV, the through line among all the different artists we've talked about so far, that explains everything really gracefully, right? Our hypothesis here is that their underlying perspective is that they know they can always keep getting better, which might seem like a bit of an odd variable, but there's a bunch of psychological research that shows if you have someone who kind of just holds the opinion, just thinks that they can keep getting better at something if they genuinely put the effort in, tend to outperform like someone who just has the opposing opinion that there's some sort of like natural limit to whatever the thing is that they're doing. Which makes sense when you apply it to what we've talked about, because that underlying opinion kind of affects how you react to certain stuff. Like if Sargent thought that he was at his absolute limit and there was nothing he could do when he was failing with those hands, he'd never have tried to keep going until he finally nailed it. If Miyazaki thought there was nothing he could do when he walked into that museum and saw all that incredible art, if he just thought, oh, these artists are just on a naturally higher level than me, then he never would have tried to use it to take his own thing to the next level. It just feels so wishy-washy. It feels so like TikTok psychology-ish that if you believe, you can achieve, but the reason an underlying perspective is simple as that, the belief that with effort you can kind of keep getting better, it impacts your actions, or rather your reactions. It impacts how you react when you see, it's like the underlying thing that impacts how you react when you see better art. It impacts how you react when you like are constantly making errors in your drawings, and over a long enough time span it can make a difference. I'm not trying to act like it's somehow like the end all be all or like the one pill that's gonna make you super duper good at drawing, but it just leads to the right cascade of actions and puts you in like a much better position to handle a lot of these common artist problems that could have a noticeable impact on your growth. Does that make sense? Which is kind of super cool, huh? It's kind of cool. Every time I make a video like this, where it's so funny how our brains work, but it never fails. They're so simple, but also so stupid, and also so it just doesn't make any sense. Great. Now, I don't know if when you clicked on this video, you wanted like some sort of secret technique to get good at, but there's just already so many good videos on like the technique side of drawing and stuff. So, but I just never noticed anyone taking it from this more psychological angle or whatever. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it. But I think the most coolest thing is just really realizing that there's low-key nothing unique about whatever artist problem you face. Like everyone's gone through it. Everyone. Whenever I'm trying to draw something and it's just not working out, I kind of think to myself, damn, like someone like a Da Vinci or like a Murata, who's one of my favorite manga artists. I kind of just imagine them when they were a lot younger, struggling to learn how to draw like the second eye or something. And I just kind of find it funny to realize that, the artist experience is kind of universal. It's kind of funny to think about.